What's up guys, it's Nathan here, and today I'm going to be walking you through a quick little exercise called bottlenecking. Now, bottlenecking is a simple problem-solving framework that will help you explore a problem space and come up with actionable solutions to some of your biggest challenges. And this can be applied to your business or even your personal life. Wherever you have problems that need solving, bottlenecking is the exercise for you. So let's jump into it. Now, it can be helpful when you're doing this exercise if you have kind of a general problem or idea space that you want to explore already in mind. For example, let's say you are thinking you need to improve conversion on your homepage, or maybe you need to think through your marketing strategy or something kind of really big picture, but still a little bit narrowed in focus rather than just every problem that you could possibly solve ever. But it does work for very broad general situations too. For example, how can I improve my business this year is a question that you could use bottlenecking to help solve. Because what bottlenecking does is it goes from the really broad, divergent brainstorming into a very convergent, specific solution. So even if you're starting from a very general place, you can get to a very specific solution using bottlenecking. So for the sake of today's example, in order to make it more realistic, I went ahead and came up with a fictional business that we can solve some problems for together. So this business is a SaaS company, and the problem that they solve is they help other businesses fire employees. Now, nobody likes firing anybody. It's not fun, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable. And it's one of the worst things you ever have to do as a founder or as a manager. For most people. I guess there's maybe a few people who get off on that sort of thing, but for the most part, it pretty much sucks all the way around, whether you're the one doing the firing or you're the one getting fired. So the idea behind this business is that they turn firing into a positive experience. So let's give them a fun name. Let's call this business Firing Squad. So as we go through all of the steps in this process, we'll be doing it from the perspective of the business owner of Firing Squad. Make sense? Okay, let's get into it. So to actually do this exercise, it's really simple and you don't need much. All you need is a standard sheet of plain white printer paper, A4 size letter size paper, and something to write with. We'll use a pen. Okay? Now, to get everything prepared for the exercise, all we have to do is take our paper and fold it in half, one time lengthwise, give it a nice crease, and then fold it one more time lengthwise again, give it a nice crease, and then unfold the paper and lay it flat on the table. So now you've got these nice 4 quadrants on the paper, 4 boxes. And we're going to use these 4 boxes to organize the information that we're coming up with during this process. Okay? So it's going to give us a nice framework to keep everything in the right place. Now, bottlenecking is an 8-step process. So there's 8 individual steps, and each one leads into the next. So we'll be working from left to right and top to bottom. So we'll go in this kind of a Z-shaped pattern on the paper. So number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So starting with step number 1, I'm going to place a number 1 in the corner just to keep it organized. In step number 1, what we want to do is we want to start brainstorming, and we want to start from a really positive place. So we're going to start by thinking of all the things that are working in our business. And just a quick note, the reason why we start with things that are working, we start with something positive, is because we want to set a positive tone for the exercise. We don't want to start thinking about problems right away because that can kind of put a negative spin on things. We want to start on a high note, then we're going to dive into the kind of the negative areas, and we're going to lift out the positive solutions, and we're going to end on another high note, okay? So we start with what is working. Now these are things, it could be anything that's working in your business right now, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem. So as you write, just kind of think about the things that you're grateful for that are going well. So maybe, your marketing is working really well, or maybe you've had a really great couple of hires and you really enjoy the employees or the team that you've put together. Or maybe, the new office has a really nice natural light and it makes everybody happy to be at work. Whatever it is, you just come up with ideas. So we're going to start writing it down. And as we go through these, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me write because it's going to take like 40 minutes to get through this if we do it that way. So I'm just going to speed up the tape every time I start writing, and then I'll show you the results at the end. So here we go. Okay, so we got a list of things that are working in the business. It's in no particular order. I just let my thoughts kind of flow naturally. So that's what you want to do. Just get out of your own way. Don't edit as you go. Just as soon as something comes into your head, you think it's something that's working, take it as a win, jot it down, move on to the next thing. Okay, there's no bad ideas at this stage. And that's it for step number 1. Okay, now that we're a little loosened up, we got our warm-up exercise in. Now we're going to move on to step number 2. And now we're going to get a little more serious. Now we're going to talk about what isn't working in the business. And these are going to be all of the problems, all of the challenges, and really anything that's just maybe even annoying in your business right now that's not working for you, that you wish that you could change, and that you definitely would change if you had the time or energy to do it. So we're going to be prioritizing off of this list. So at this point, try to really think in terms of what is going to have an impact if this problem were no longer a problem anymore, that it would really make your life easier. Because what we're trying to do is get to the number 1 bottleneck in your business, right? So this will pretty much happen naturally as soon as you put yourself into the brainstorming mode of thinking about problems in your business. They should rise up to the surface pretty quick because you've been probably staying up all night thinking about them anyway. So hopefully they're top of mind. So I'm going to jump in and start here. Okay, so now I've got a list of all the problems in the business, and I'll just run through a few quickly so you can get an idea of the types of problems that you might be uncovering. So for example, it might be financial in nature, you haven't hit break even yet. Maybe you need 25 more clients to hit break even, but right now you don't have the staff to service that many clients. So you're kind of in a chicken and the egg problem. That's kind of common. Maybe your offshore dev team is running behind on the roadmap and the backlog is growing because they keep missing the timelines or the milestones. Maybe you have a manual onboarding process that isn't scaling, so you need to add some automation so it doesn't take up as much of your time. And or maybe this one, recent fires are unhappy and they're leaving bad reviews. That's a problem. How do we keep recent fires happy? That's part of the mission of the company, right, is to give a good experience on both sides. So that's a big one. Maybe as the owners of the business, since you haven't hit break even yet, you can't pay yourselves yet. So that can be painful. And then you're hiring people who like firing people is harder than it sounds. Maybe there's actually a harder job to hire for than you would have thought. So those are some ideas of things that you might come up with. And really you just want to try and always go back to, is solving this problem going to make everything else easier? That's the problem that you're looking for. But the reason we do it this way is because sometimes it's hard to know which one is more important than the other one. So we just put them all down on paper. Don't worry about ranking them yet. We're going to do that in the next step. Okay, so that's it for step number 2. Okay, so we're ready for step number 3. We're going to come down into the bottom left box and we're going to put a number 3 there. For step number 3, we're going to be prioritizing the problems that we came up with in step number 2. So in step number 2, we just wrote them in no particular order, and now we're going to try to order them in terms of which one is the most impactful to the business. So we'll start number 1 at the top will be the most impactful problem, all the way down to the last one, which is the least impactful problem. Okay, so you're going to just go ahead and go through this. Everybody's prioritization will be a little different, so just trust your gut. I'm going to go through my list, and I'll see you back when we're done. So once we have this ordered list with the number 1 problem at the top and the number 8 problem at the bottom, now we're going to move on to step number 4. Okay, time for step 4. In step 4, we're going to take the number 1 problems that we identified in step number 3, and now we're going to reframe them as challenges. Okay, so we're going to give them a positive spin, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to rephrase them as standardized questions. And the format that we use is called the how might we format. That's how might we ... So the reason we standardize these is so that normally in a workshop with a group, we are all coming up with individual how might we's. And then we take all of the how might we's and we put them together and we vote on them. So it really helps to have a standard format when we're comparing one challenge question to another so that they're easy to read and make sense of. In this case, we're not really doing as much comparison, but learning this format is going to probably help you down the road, especially if you are going back and solving more than one problem. So for today, we're just going to focus on the first one, but optionally, you can do step 4 for each of the problems that you've identified by step 3, and then you can go through steps 5 through 8 for each one of those problem challenge the challenge questions. Okay, so I'll show you how we do this. It's just like back in grammar school when you have an essay prompt like, what is this book about? And then they always told you to start off the beginning of the essay by rephrasing the question as a statement. So you would start the essay with, this book is about ... Same exact idea, only we're reversing it. So in this case, how might we, and we're going with the recent fires are unhappy and leaving bad reviews. So we can say, how might we improve, or let's say this, how might we create a better experience for people who are getting fired. Okay? Because that's half of the business, right? The people paying us, obviously, are the companies doing the firing, but half of our premise is that we make firing better for both the people doing the firing and also the people getting fired. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're improving this experience and that these guys aren't leaving as unhappy, and certainly not more unhappy than they would be if they were just fired by the company directly. Okay? So this is how we do it. Put a question mark at the end. So your challenge question ends up being, how might we create a better experience for people getting fired? Okay? And now you can go back, like I said, and do this for each of these, but we're going to just stick with one and move on to the next step. So as you can see, we've run out of room on this side of the paper. So before we can continue, we have to turn the paper over to the other side. And now we have a fresh, clean piece of white paper. We're gonna start again in the upper left corner. We're gonna put a number 5. And for step number 5, now we're gonna shift gears and now we're gonna start to ideate solutions to the problem that we're trying to solve. So we're gonna start answering the challenge question. How might we improve the experience for people getting fired, okay? And just like we did with the problems in the step number 2, where we just wrote freeform, brainstormed, and came up with as many ideas as possible, we're gonna do the exact same thing with the solutions now. So we'll just start here and just come up with as many solutions as you can think of. And again, I can't emphasize enough, there's no bad answers at this stage, okay? We're gonna curate later. So right now, don't edit whatsoever. Anything that comes into your head, just jot it down. Go for quantity over quality. Here we go. Okay, so now that we've brainstormed a bunch of possible solutions to the problem, our job is pretty much done here. So again, keep going as long as you want until you've run out of ideas. And there's no bad ideas. Even something as stupid as give them a hug, it popped in my head, so I wrote it down. Okay, so come up with as many as you can, and when you're ready, we'll move on to step number 6. So for step 6, we're gonna go through another familiar prioritization exercise. We're gonna take all of the ideas we came up with in step number 5, and again, we're just gonna rank them in an ordered list, from number 1 being the most viable of the solutions, the one we think is gonna have the biggest impact on actually solving the problem, and the last one being the least likely to solve the problem. Okay, so we'll just go through these. Okay, so now we have an ordered list of all of the best solutions we could come up with. So the first one is negotiating a severance package. The second one is getting them a recommendation. Third is to refer them to recruiters. Fourth is to give them a gift card. Fifth is to find them another job or help them find another job. Sixth is to help them apply for unemployment. 7 is to, if all else fails, take down the reviews off the site so they can't leave bad reviews if they are unhappy. And number 8 is kind of a throwaway, is give them a hug. So what you can see here is you might come up with actually a number of ideas that all could potentially help solve the problem. And your final solution might be not just one, but it might be a combination of a few different ideas here that end up making it into the final solution. So you might try to do all of these top 5 things, 6 things. You know, you might have a number of different options for your customers in order to make the overall experience better. So that's it for number 6. Now we're going to go ahead and further prioritize these in number 7. Okay, step number 7. We're almost to the end here. Number 7 is the point where we're really going to narrow down which of these 8 items we're going to actually start to implement. So the way we do this is we're going to draw a simple grid on the paper with an X and Y axis. Okay, so the X-axis we're going to label effort, and the Y-axis we're going to label impact. Okay, this is an impact effort scale, and it helps if we just kind of draw a little dotted line down the middle both ways to give us some different quadrants. And now, what an impact effort scale is designed to do is to help you plot the different ideas on the scale so that you can get an idea of how much impact or how well is this going to solve the problem versus how much time, energy, and resources are required in order to implement the solution. Okay? So everything is going to fall somewhere on the scale. When we're doing this on a whiteboard, we just kind of hold up the sticky note that has the solution on it, and I ask the group to move it left or right on the effort scale first, and we find a position. Then we move it up or down on the impact scale. So we do that both ways until we find where it should be, and then we plot it. In this case, we're just going to write the number that we used to represent that item. So starting with number 1, negotiating a severance. For that, probably pretty high effort, I would think, to speak to each of the employers and first of all get them to actually offer severance, which they might not do in every case. Negotiate what that package might include. It'll probably be different for every single employee on a case-by-case basis, and then get them to actually execute on that severance package. So I'd say that probably falls pretty high on the effort scale, maybe one of the highest. But the impact would be super high as well, right? How happy would an employee be if they went from getting fired with nothing to getting fired with, 6 months pay or something? That would be pretty amazing, right? So let's put that up here, kind of high on impact and effort. Number 2 is get them a recommendation from the previous employer. Now that would probably also have a pretty high impact in terms of goodwill to the employee by leaving things on good terms. Maybe not quite as high as a severance package, but still pretty high. And then really low on the effort. I think that would be pretty simple to execute on, right? It's just simply writing a letter. So number 3 is referring them to recruiters. Again, this is something you could easily set up some existing relationships. This would definitely help them with job placement. And it would be pretty easy to do. Once you got the system set up, the effort would be very low. Number 4 is the gift card. This is probably slightly less impactful, but definitely low effort. And number 5, help them find another job. That might be really hard, actually, to do, especially if you're going to hold yourself accountable to it and stick with them through the process. So high effort, probably also high impact, though. I think they would be super happy with the service if it ended with them having another job. 6, help them get unemployment. Probably less impact than number 5. Also high effort, because that can be a pretty long-term process to get approved. There's a lot of steps involved. But maybe you could automate the process so that after a large initial effort, it became pretty easy, just a simple walkthrough that they can go through or something like that. Anyway, number 7 is to just take down the reviews altogether so that the people who get fired who aren't happy can't leave negative reviews of the business. We can say that is probably not the highest impact. It's a simple, quick fix, but it's also going to have negative impacts on the rest of the business. So that goes over here. And number 8, giving them a hug. Probably not the most practical solution. It might have a decent impact in making them feel better in the moment, but it would take a lot of effort to track them all of these people down and actually give them physical hugs, so probably not very practical. Okay, so now we've got everything plotted on this chart. So let's go ahead and go into what this chart actually means and how do you read it. So as you can see, we have different quadrants in the chart. And over here on the top left, we have items that are high impact and high effort. That's going to be our sweet spot. These are things that we can get done relatively quickly with fewer or minimal resources that are going to have a really high initial impact on the business, right? This is the low-hanging fruit. So we really want to target the stuff that's in this section, right? Because this is going to be giving us the most bang for our buck, okay? These are quick wins. So definitely want to prioritize the items here, and you'll see in the next step we're going to draw from this quadrant here. But there's also some good ideas following in other sections, and we don't want those to go to waste. So if we look here at other high impact items, which are higher effort, these are things that, although they're definitely going to be helpful once they're implemented, the cost of implementation is a bit higher. So it might take longer, it might require more planning, more work. In essence, it's a larger project. So whereas these are do now items, these might be projects for additional planning, right? So these are things that you'd want to maybe move onto your roadmap and then look at how you might implement them down the road. Down here on the lower left, we have low impact, low effort. Now, at first glance, these might seem like not very useful, but a lot of items might fall into this category which individually don't have a large impact, like usability fixes or minor improvements to the UI. But when added up together, they can have a cumulative effect that creates a much higher impact. So we don't want these to go to waste, but these end up looking more like individual tasks that can go on a to-do list or maybe on the backlog as well, but that are just going to end up having a little bit lower priority than the do now items. And then over here on the lower right, we have high effort, low impact. Okay, and these are things that probably aren't worth the time and effort, at least not immediately. We do want to still write these things down, but we can probably forget about them for now. They might become useful later. That's why we never want to just toss out ideas, because sometimes after we take care of some of these other areas, these things start to shift on the board a little bit. They take on a different meaning for the business. So that's it for how to use the impact effort scale in number 7, and now we'll move on to number 8. Okay, now we're on step number 8. This is the final step of the bottlenecking process. So just to recap, we've explored all of the problems that we wanted to solve in our business. We prioritized those problems, and then we turn those problems and reframe them into challenge questions. And then we use that challenge question to inspire us to come up with a bunch of different possible solutions to solve that challenge. We prioritize those solutions, and then we place those solutions on an impact effort scale to figure out which ones were the most viable to do quickly, that were going to give us the most impactful results right away. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to take the items from the sweet spot in our upper left quadrant of the impact effort scale, and we need to make those solutions actionable, right? It's one thing to have a general idea of what needs to be done, but without clear steps on how to do it, it's not likely that you're going to be able to move forward. So for number 8, real simple, we're going to take we can do all 3 of these. We might just pick one. So in this case, let's just pick one. Let's do one that's pretty easy. Let's do the recommendations. And in general, I would recommend focusing on one at a time. But if you're feeling ambitious and you want to do the entire sweet spot all in one shot, if you have the manpower to do it, you can do that. But we're going to do one at a time for this exercise. And we want to simplify this as much as possible. So we're going to limit it to 3 actionable steps, which means that these aren't going to be super granular. These are going to be kind of the broad strokes of what we need to do in order to get to this solution. So we know that we're starting with nothing done, right? And we want to end up at the end with this solution delivered. So sometimes it helps to work backwards. So we can say that the third step is to deliver a recommendation to the fired person. I have to come up with a good way to describe fired people. Maybe the firee, I don't know. I think the business should brand that a little bit so it doesn't sound so terrible. So deliver a recommendation to the fired person, that's the last step. So the first step, in order to create a recommendation, probably we want to work off maybe something that's really easy for the employer to produce. So maybe we create a template for them. So all they have to do is fill in a couple of details that are specific to that employee, and the rest of the template is kind of streamlined for them. I'll probably make it really easy to do. So all the employer has to do then is personalize the template. And if this is on the SaaS platform, it would already have their logo and their, their whole, it would be like in their stationery already. So all they have to do is personalize it and sign it. And that's it. And then they hit OK and they save it or whatever, and then it gets sent directly to the employee, the former employee, I should say. So that's how we do it. So we have 3 actionable steps that we can start now working on in order to get to a solution to this problem. Now, I will say again, another important point is that we don't want to think of these in terms of coming up with a complete finished solution that is fully delivered to the market. What we really want to do is emphasize action steps that can be accomplished within a 1 to 2 week time frame, so relatively quickly, in order to validate whether or not our original hypothesis, which is that this particular solution will solve the problem that we're trying to solve for the people we're trying to solve it for. What we don't want to do is invest a bunch of time and money into creating the solution only to find out that it didn't solve the problem as well as we thought it would. So think of this in terms of creating a prototype for this solution. So we want to do something that we can test quickly and get feedback on and then iterate on. And that's a process that we follow for everything that we do here at Paradigm. But it's important for you to start thinking that way as well. So something that will take 1 to 2 weeks at the most, that you can get some immediate feedback on from your customers, and then find out whether or not it's worth investing additional time and resources into creating a fully realized, fully developed solution to that particular problem, or for that particular solution, sorry. Okay, so that is the end of step number 8. And ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. That does conclude the instructional portion of this video. We have just finished an example run through of the bottlenecking framework. So just to recap real quick, step number 1, we went over what's working in the business right now. Step number 2, we brainstormed on what isn't working in the business. So the opposite of step 1, pros and cons. And then we came down to step 3, we reordered the items in step number 2. In step number 2, we didn't edit, we didn't critique, we just got our ideas on paper. And step number 3, now we curate and we order these based on which are the most impactful problems to solve for the business long term. Number 4, we rephrase those top questions, or those top problems, in the form of a how might we question, which is a standardized format. And in this case, how might we create a better experience for people getting fired, right? So we use that format. Now we came over to step 5 and we answered that question, that how might we question, with as many possible potential solutions as we could think of. And we just, again, brainstormed these without any real, curation or no self-editing. We didn't say, oh, that's not a good idea, and scratch it out. We just wrote down everything we could think of with no judgment, just getting the ideas flowing and on paper. And then in step 6, we went back and reordered those in order of priority, based on which of these solutions are the most viable and the most likely to actually solve the problem. Okay? So once we had that curated list, then we plotted those items onto an impact effort scale, and that gave us a real bird's eye view, a very practical look at what it would take to actually implement these items and what the impact would be on the business overall. And by looking at it from that perspective, it made it easier for us to decide which things to work on immediately. And then we took those items and we made them actionable. So we took the solutions and we wrote out what are the first 3 steps to get started on this today, so that we can set things in motion and start to within the next 1 to 2 weeks, really validate whether or not we're on the right track and whether that particular solution is going to, in fact, solve the problem the way we thought it would. We want to get to that answer as quickly as possible while investing the least amount of time and effort. So again, this is not a complete solution outline. This is really just the first step towards validation. Okay? So once we've done that, now we've pretty much got a good idea of how to tackle this problem. And again, optionally, you may want to do this. Go back for each of the problems that you identified in number 3 and repeat steps 4 through 8 for each of those problems. Okay, and then number 8, you can repeat number 8 for all of the top solutions as well. Okay? So that will take obviously a few more pieces of paper, but you can spend as much time on this as you want, refining it and getting yourself to a point where you're ready to move forward. And that, my friends, is bottlenecking. So now that we've gone through the exercise, you can stop the video now if you want, but if you want to stick around, I just wanted to give a little bit of background for those who are interested and a little bit of credit for those who deserve it on how we came up with this particular exercise. So one of the things we do at Paradigm is we do short problem framing workshops that are based on the work of a design agency out of Berlin called AJ and Smart, and they run a process very similar to what we just went through called lightning decision jams. It's an exercise to solve any problem without unstructured discussion. So the way it works is it's actually done in a group setting, usually in an office with a whiteboard, sticky notes, some voting dots. And what we do is we work with the client team to basically go through the same steps that we just went through, but we do it all at a bigger scale and as a group. And the process is designed to cut out all of the kind of loose, unstructured discussion that usually happens in meetings and really focus on taking action, going through the steps, and making decisions quickly. So credit to AJ and Smart for getting us started down that path. And what we really wanted to do was to take something that would normally be done in 60, 90, maybe even 120 minutes in a workshop with a group and make it something that you could do as an individual at any time with a piece of paper and just taking your own notes. And we think it translates really well. So hopefully you agree. So bottlenecking is really a stripped down version of the LDJ, and the lightning decision jam is really a stripped down version of the larger workshops that we do at Paradigm, which are based on the work of this gentleman, Jake Knapp, and his book Sprint, which outlines a process known as the design sprint, which is a week-long process that allows businesses to solve big problems and also test the solutions to those problems using a rapid prototyping process in just under a week. So we actually get together with clients, we do these workshops, we're face-to-face in the office, and at the end of the week, we've explored the problem space, we've come up with a bunch of awesome solutions, we've narrowed it down to one to focus on, we've prototyped that solution, we've tested it with real users, and we've come up with some actionable insights on what to do next. So if you're interested in learning more about what we do here at Paradigm or about myself, if you have any questions about this process, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me at my email, nathan@paradigm.com. That's Paradigm with 3 I's, Paradiiigm. And if you're curious why there's 3 I's, I'm happy to explain that to you as well. You can also just shoot me a private message, a direct message on Messenger from Facebook, if that's how you found this, or you can go to the website and you can contact me through the website. Okay, so I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this. I'd love to hear how this process worked for you. Was it useful? Did you actually implement it? How did you implement it? How did it help you? Did it help you solve some problems? I'd love to hear either way. Even if you thought it was crap, please tell me that and maybe I can work on improving it. So totally appreciate all of you. Thank you for your attention and your time, and have an awesome day. Bye.